This is the Hype Squad with Charli McConnell, a podcast where women can be full of themselves and brag about what they're good at. Each week, we're going to bring you conversations covering topics like motherhood, life, relationships, business, and everything in between, because anything is possible with your very own Hype Squad. What's up, ladies? Welcome back to the Hype Squad. I'm Charli McConnell, your host, and today we have Mary Grayson Nix Caden. I'm so excited you're here. She is the owner of Yogalete Auburn and the Yoga Room AU and began her journey in 2018 at the Yoga Room. A former college soccer athlete, she turned to yoga to heal and strengthen her body after injuries and surgeries. With a master's in physical education and a bachelor's in exercise science and a 200-hour yoga teacher certification from Auburn, she combines her expertise with her passion for teaching athletes. Her functional flows blend mindfulness, breathwork, and movement to leave you strong, resilient, and at ease. Off the mat, she shares her love for yoga with Auburn University athletes. Welcome, Mary Grayson. I'm so happy you're here.
Yes, me too.
There's so much stuff. We've been talking like for what feels like a while, but I feel like we're going to be fast friends. There's so much stuff I want to cover with you today. But first off, I want to say congratulations because you have recently purchased the yoga room.
Did.
That's a big deal.
Yes.
And you're not like, you don't, from what I understand, you don't have like a business background.
Not at all.
Is that fair?
That is very fair.
So let's start with that. Like, what's that been like for you to buy a business, which you were a huge part of before? I mean, you took yoga there. I assume you were probably an instructor, and then to take over. I would love to hear what that experience was like for you.
Yeah. So for me, I was really just kind of in a place in my life where I was ready for a change, I think. And yoga has been my biggest passion for several years. And I've been working several different jobs, doing kind of different things at the different jobs. And I kind of wanted to combine everything and sort of just do yoga. And I was able to do that. The old owner was ready, I was ready, and it just kind of worked out for both of us. And I think the timing was perfect. I think taking over has been, anything that is new is hard for sure. It's something that I'm new to as far as business, but I have a little bit of a foundation with owning Yogalete, my other yoga business for athletes, but I'm just a one-man band.
Mm-hmm.
And so taking over the studio and kind of being a leader for a lot of other teachers, like over 10 other teachers.
Oh, wow.
I think we have close to 15 actually teachers doing stuff. So just kind of learning how to lead and how to manage and all of that kind of stuff has been new, but also fun and challenging and exciting, all the things.
Yeah, it's a new muscle to flex for
Yes.
sure. Um, yeah, I think, and I shared with you before we recorded. So the business I had before this, now I'm in a one-man band, but before it was very different. My last business, we had all male employees. It was a very male industry type of business. Um, but my business partner was a woman. And so, and a great friend of mine, she and I had our own sort of like evolution with each other, working, toe to toe, but then having a team underneath us was what was challenging to say the least. And they were all men, which I thought would be, and it was what I would probably assume, I don't want to say less challenging, very different type of challenge, right? Still personalities to navigate and all of that stuff, but not quite. I have all sisters. So I'm comparing it to that world, right? Like when you have a room full of women, personalities, like you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. So that was different for me. But then my business partner and I had to navigate our situation between the two of us and just our differences and our similarities and so on and so forth. But we were starting from scratch. So to take over something, do you find that like your management style is much different than the previous owner?
I think so a little bit. I think that I have a very to a fault sometimes a very perfectionistic
Mm-hmm.
quality about me, and I want things to be right, and I want them to be, I want to have documents, and I want things to be organized, and so that's something that I'm kind of navigating right now is trying to tone down some of that a little
Mm-hmm.
bit and just kind of like let things I guess kind of work themselves out right now, because there's a lot that I'm having to organize and a lot that I'm doing just so that I can get my brain straight.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's how my brain works.
Yeah.
It's not how everybody's brain works. And so that's definitely something I'm navigating right now. It's just the differences of running a business.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think like taking over something that already has like SOPs like in place that you may have to change or people. I remember when I started waiting tables in like high school, I had no experience and I went in and I'm like, I've never done this before, but I swear I can learn. And I remember the guy who hired me, he was like, I would prefer you have no experience. It's a lot harder to break bad habits than it is to teach you like from the jump.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking at the time, like, that's not what I thought would be the case. But then as I've gotten older and I've been in business, that is most of the time a true story. Habits are really hard to break.
Yeah.
And if people are used to their job being this particular way and then someone comes in and changes it, sometimes that can be difficult to navigate.
Yes, definitely. And that's one thing I didn't want to do off the
Yeah.
bat was come in and just change a whole bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was blessed in that I'm able to kind of create my own organization in the background.
Yeah.
I like things digitally in a computer type of
Mm-hmm.
thing, and so I'm working on a lot of that right now, kind of digitizing everything
Mm.
for everybody. And so, just I'm not trying to change anything, but I
Mm-hmm.
am trying to just kind of like keep the ball rolling,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. And build onto the brand that she's created because I mean, the yoga room has touched so many people's lives and
Mm-hmm.
it still touches mine. It was the very first studio that I actually ever walked into, and so to be able
Wow.
to own it and try to kind of continue to build the brand that she built from the beginning is exciting and all the feels exciting,
Yeah.
scary, all the different things.
Yeah, I can totally imagine the
Yeah,
scary and the exciting
yeah,
part, but how full circle it must feel like of like wow. And
hmm,
and on also like the person you bought the business from, I can only imagine how safe it must have felt to sell to someone who has so much stake in it, right? Who
yeah,
loves it and has so much passion for it as opposed to just some random person that is more of like a business person who wants to just take over and make a buck type of
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Um, entrusting her baby to you because I will say
yeah.
when you own a business, it is like a
It
child.
is.
It is like you have to nurture it. And I say this too about like a partnership. If you're in like, and not just like a marriage partnership, but like a business partnership, that's like a marriage. I used to say all the time, I called Michelle, my business partner in the last business, my sister wife, for a multitude of other reasons. But I would always joke that like our marriage to each other, our business marriage was healthier than my marriage at home because I saw her more. I had to navigate conflict with her a lot faster because we had to like keep going,
Figure it
you
out.
know?
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, this is such a healthy marriage. Oh
Mm-hmm.
my gosh, I got to like take some of this home. I haven't seen my husband in a week, right? So yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And it is different, like the one man band type thing for me to come from multiple people in an office to being by myself is a huge transition, which I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure like the opposite is just as much. Tell me about Yogalete and what that business entails.
Yeah, so Yogalete, I think, is one thing a lot of people have been confused by for a long time. I think I was even confused by it for a little bit. I think when you start a business and then years down the road, things just sort of evolve and change,
Mm-hmm.
right? But when I started Yogalete, it was really so that I could continue to do a certain thing that I really loved, which was teach to Auburn University athletes. And when I
Mm-hmm.
graduated, I didn't have many options. I had to figure something out. So I created this business and became a vendor and I continued that job. I continued to teach and it's worked out great. I've met a lot of different teams at the university and it's given me this outlet to be able to go and be in the athletic world, to be able to be around Auburn sports, which is just awesome for me. I've been an Auburn fan my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
I used to really, really look up to the Auburn soccer team because I was a
Mm-hmm.
soccer player. And when I was little, we actually came up my club soccer team when we were like 13, something like that years old, and we were ball girls. for the soccer team. And
Wow.
I always will remember that. But when I was with the Eagles program, I got to work with them a little bit with the Eagles students. And then um, when I created Yogalete, I've, still gotten to hang out with the soccer girls and some of the other teams as well. And it really gives me that outlet to be around something that I'm familiar with and really love, which is sport.
Mhm.
Um, but it also gives me this platform to teach them as well, kind of where I've come from and the struggle, after athletics, whether they go pro or not,
Mhm.
at some point you're not going to be playing your sport anymore and you got
Mhm.
to figure it out. And so I try to bring mindset type of motivation. I try to bring in mobility, flexibility, kind of whatever the movement is they're looking for, I'll bring that. But I also add layers of mindset and things to think about as well, just to kind of better yourself as a person, better yourself as an athlete. I look up to a lot of motivational type people like Inky Johnson.
Mhm.
I like Mel Robbins a lot as well. And
Mhm.
so I try to layer in some of those types of things with my teaching. And I feel that the athletes really respond to that type of stuff, especially the female athletes, not necessarily the males.
Yeah. Well, and like even if we talked about before we recorded, my husband's been to the yoga room. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, he was the one who got me started going to take yoga. And it all started from like a shoulder injury, and he's not flexible at all, and he like pushed himself to go, and it is like stereotypically more vulnerable for a man to be in that world. Like even when I would go to classes with him, he'd be one of two guys in a room full of 20 women,
Yeah.
so it's a little, you got to like up your game a little bit to feel comfortable in that room. But there is still so much opportunity for even the guys. I have a great, great friend of mine. She's a yoga instructor. She does a lot of stuff with the military,
Okay.
PTSD, all of that stuff. And it starts with yoga, but then she does like mandala building and she does breath work and grounding and she has a lot of other offerings that she gives. But it's like you go into this room with all these macho people.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just men, it's women too, but military with PTSD and varying layers of trauma, and it's if you can get them to want to work on their body and then you just kind of skate some mindfulness under like
Mm-hmm.
under the rug type of thing and sneak it in, it's like you're already in this position. There's something about yoga that, in my opinion, feels so much more mindful than like Pilates or bar, like something that you might relate to as far as like a workout program
Mm-hmm.
where it is spiritual almost, right? Dare I
Mm-hmm.
say. And like you get into that world, and like if you have a great instructor that can kind of encompass all of the different and can read the room and
Mm-hmm.
know what the room needs to hear, like
Mm-hmm.
that is a very special gift.
Yeah. No, I love it. And that's what I found when I came to
Mhm.
the yoga room. I had some amazing instructors that I would seek their classes out and go to their class, whenever they had it,
Mhm.
because I felt so motivated, and they
Yeah.
would sneak those little things in, but they would meet you where you're at with the
Mhm.
movement. You're coming in to move, but you're getting all these other things as well. And I think that's what really kind of started my healing process with my brain. And that was um like truly, that was when everything kind of changed for me and
Mm.
really opened up a lot of doors. So
So let's talk about the brain stuff
yeah.
because you were a soccer player. You had a ton of injuries and surgeries, multiple concussions, which kind of led you down the road to discovering yoga, right? So
Yes.
tell me about what that was like for you, what yoga was able to do for you.
Yeah. So, my time as an athlete, I grew up with an older brother who really pushed me to be aggressive, and like we would play in the yard, and so I was playing with the boys a lot. And so when
Mhm.
I would get to playing with the girls, I was really aggressive, and I would
Mm.
I would go hard. So I would get hurt, but I also found out later I have a hypermobility syndrome, which I think
Oh,
attributed to
wow.
a lot of my like tearing ligaments and things
Yeah.
like that. I didn't know how to take care of my body back
Yeah.
then. But anyway, that's something I learned later on after yoga. But it was when I walked into the yoga room for the first time, and I took a class because my mom was like, I think you should try yoga. I think those are going to be your people. And I was like, what are you talking about? Never done yoga. I don't stretch. I've it's going to be boring.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was going to like it. And I walk into my first vinyasa class not knowing what vinyasa was. And I mean, it was very strength based. It was hard. It was challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, why are we doing planks?
Yeah.
Like all this type of stuff. But it intrigued me. And I saw what was possible, I think. I saw people doing crow pose and stuff I'd never seen before. And I was like, what? I want to do that. Like, how do I do
So
that?
cool. Yeah.
And so I just kept going back and they kept telling me, keep coming back, keep coming back. It gets better. And I'm like, okay. So I did. And then 6 months later, I'm starting to do a crow pose. And, 6 months later, I'm standing on my head. And
Mm.
like all these things start to happen slowly.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm starting to learn things like be kind to yourself. When whoever tells you that, I
Shocker,
know,
right? Oh
right?
my gosh, you're supposed to hate
Yeah,
yourself.
I know, right? You're supposed to be hard on yourself and no pain, no gain,
Yeah, right?
100%,
Yeah.
And when I had a teacher say, I think it was, the quote was, no pain, no gain does not apply here in my
Mm,
class. Like, if you're shaking and you're grimacing your face, like, that's not what I want. I don't
mm-hmm.
want you to strain into it, that type of thing. It was like, game changer.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I don't
Permission.
have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It was giving that permission to just like take a minute and be gentle with yourself, but also encouraging you to say kind things and just it just all changed for me. I think part of that comes from athletics and that no pain, no gain kind of
Yeah.
mentality, but I think it also comes from like just not being taught that when you're
Mm-hmm.
growing up. Like you get from my perspective, I grew up going to church and all that type of stuff and my parents were very much like we go every Sunday, that type of thing, and there's a lot of like be kind to others, but no one teaches you how to treat yourself. And yoga taught me how to do that. And I think once I started to treat myself kindly, I started to treat others kindly. Wow.
Mm,
Crazy how that happens, but
mm-hmm.
yeah, there's a lot of layers to it, but that's kind of the gist of it.
God, there's so much there. I love that you said like be kind to others, but you never are taught to be kind to yourself.
Hmm.
And I think our generation are raising the next generation to be more comfortable with that.
Yeah,
And even like,
totally.
Z or whatever the next one is after millennials, I can't keep up. But
Okay.
like I think they already have been taught that, right? And
Hmm.
and and I think that there's like a happy middle ground. Sometimes
Yes.
you'll have a lot of Generation Z that are like so overly self-assured that
Yes.
sometimes it's hard to like understand. Especially from like our generation, like you're not supposed to think you're that great,
Yeah.
right? But oh
Yeah.
my God, I'm so jealous. I want to think I'm that great too, right?
The confidence.
Body confidence. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like that is like the number one thing I'm jealous of. But you're so right. Like I can remember my younger years in a multitude of ways, just not treating myself well, whether it was eating
Yeah.
disorders. Food was a huge thing.
Hmm.
And I think that almost all women have some sort of disordered eating in
Totally.
their pattern. Like maybe you weren't diagnosed with an eating disorder, but disordered eating in some capacity. Men too, right? I think it's probably less common, but not like it's not that it doesn't happen.
Totally.
I had a client who has an eating disorder, but she overeats, and
Hmm.
she had such a hard time with making sense of calling it an eating disorder because in her mind, you're supposed to be skinny
Mm.
if you have an eating disorder. And so she couldn't allow herself to call it an eating disorder. And
Hmm.
I'm like, it's an eating disorder. It's a disordered way of eating. Like it is the same thing.
Yeah.
Um,
That,
but
yeah.
but I think for me, like and I don't know exactly when the flip happened for me. And maybe it was just super gradual over time. But then it became so much of like, and now my biggest message is I am the only person I have to live with for the rest of my life. If I'm not going to be kind to myself and treat
Yeah.
myself well, who the hell else will?
Yeah.
Right. Like, and it's such, and I can remember hearing like, be your own soulmate. Like, don't need a partner.
Yeah.
Like, be whole. Don't find someone to complete you. Complete. Like, I remember all that messaging, right? Which was total bullshit. I'm just, and I got married really young, right? And luckily we are super compatible, and we have made this beautiful life together. But I was 22. Like,
Yeah, that's young.
who would have known like how that could have ended up? And I was not whole on my own, right? Like, I had to find myself within my marriage, and same for him,
Mm-hmm.
which was definitely an interesting thing to navigate, but we both were able to do it. But I learned uh, recently, maybe like within the past 5 years, probably, like, if I'm not good, I can't be good anywhere else. And
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like you need these strains to kind of make you aware of that, because
Mm-hmm.
you can just coast
Oh
for a
yeah.
really, really long
Oh yeah.
time. And it's not until the shit really hits the fan that you're like, oh, I have to recalibrate. Like, I have to come back. And I don't think some people get that like blatant message until much later in life. I'm thankful that, like, on the grand scale of things, mine happened pretty early.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's such a great life lesson that you have to, and sometimes it is because shit hits the fan and you don't have another option,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was for me. And I think now that I think about it, it probably was with Sailor's epilepsy, because that was 5 years. And if I didn't get my shit together, it was going to get worse a lot quicker, as far as
Yeah.
like the family dynamic and how I handled stuff. And so that I would, yeah, that would have to have been the catalyst, but nobody else is going to do it for you.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. And I think after all my concussions and stuff like that, I had, my family's amazing. My siblings, my parents, like, also super supportive, makes me want to
Mm-hmm.
cry just thinking about it. But they have never, left my side after all of the stuff that we went through with the concussions and the going from doctor to doctor to
Mm,
trying to figure it out. And they just want the best for me. And so once I finally did kind of hit that rock bottom and I really didn't have another choice, like, I
mm-hmm.
had to make a change in my life, or else I was probably going to die.
Mm,
um with, everything that I was going through. And um yeah, that was sort of the catalyst. I had to hit rock bottom for sure, to be able to get out of what I was getting out of. But it really wasn't until later that I started to put the pieces together of, like, of all of the different things, and why this was happening, and why this was happening, and why I was doing this. And
mm-hmm.
um that's something that's yoga has taught me to do, is, like, take that time to reflect and take that time to stop and, like, look at what you're doing. It's not about what's happening to you, but it's about how you kind of pull yourself up and how you respond to it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's I think one of the biggest things that I've been able to do, is find that resilience within myself, and pick up the pieces, and just really look inside myself and be like, all right, we gotta get it together.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think I've said to myself and to clients and friends and just anyone who will listen, like, it's almost like you have to learn the language of your body. Like, you
mm-hmm,
don't speak the same language. Your mind and your body are almost never on the same page.
mm-hmm,
And it's almost like you have to learn that language, and that takes time. But yoga and breath, which yoga and breath are so closely
yeah,
related, I think are huge foundations for figuring that out. For one, you're in your body in yoga. Like, you have to be, you have to come
mm-hmm,
out of your head. You have to focus on your breath, moving through certain positions, like not holding your breath, breathing through things, or learning. And I do like a lot of breath work with clients and stuff. Breath work, don't sleep on that shit. Like,
yeah,
it is incredible what it can do for you. I mean, there's so many varying degrees of it. But like, just simple box breathing to like calm yourself down, or
mm-hmm,
to hype yourself up. Like, so much is already, like, we have all the tools for it. We just
mm-hmm,
don't speak the language.
yeah,
And we don't know, like, anxiety. Everyone has some level of anxiety. Some are much more severe and more like medically intervened type of anxiety. But I also think that, like, anxiety is such a, like, it's a language of its own. Like, it's a messaging system. I was talking to somebody the other day, they called it a smoke signal of like, hey, come back here. Like, we're trying to tell you something. Your
Mhm.
body is trying to communicate with you. And it's either you need to get up and move, you need to breathe, like something needs to change.
Mhm.
But if you're not listening or like paying attention to those smoke signals and you just kind of tamper them down and keep carrying on, it gets much
Oh
bigger,
yeah,
gets much
totally.
more severe, right?
Totally.
But stuff like yoga, like hot yoga, I never in a million years thought I would like hot yoga. I hate being hot. I hate being sweaty, but there is something like top tier next level about hot yoga because it's like you're so in the trenches of being hot and sweaty, but you're loose, like you can move your body. But for me, I get so in my head being around other people, especially workout classes and stuff like that, like just
Mhm.
feeling like, oh my God, I'm going to embarrass myself. Hot yoga, everyone's embarrassing themselves. Like no one's looking at each other. You're so like trying to just stay in your body and locked in.
Mhm.
That was my
Yeah. Yeah.
oh my God. And there was like like a 5 or 6 o'clock class. I can't remember what day it was at the yoga room where there had already been at least one before. And so it was like primed and ready. Which reminds me, are those fiddly figs still in there?
Yeah.
Girl,
They're still
those
there.
are what dreams are made of.
Yeah.
Like I have these little like wimpy little, and I'm like, if I just take them to the yoga room
They'll grow
and leave them there for like a couple of months, they'll come back like
huge.
prepped. But yeah, I think that like, yoga, whether you have like a YouTube channel, which I was looking at, which was is amazing. There's so many different outlets. I do think that like going to a class, especially a hot yoga, because you can't do hot yoga at home, not like the same, um, is such an unlocking moment. So if like anyone listening has never done that, go do it.
Mhm.
But even if you can't do that, like tapping into like a YouTube channel, or there's so many different like avenues out there to explore. I do want to talk about concussions.
Okay.
Because we were talking before we recorded, and there's so much there that I think that people don't really understand. And without
Mhm.
going too far into your own personal story, what
Yeah.
you learned about concussions and how much they can influence your mind and your body.
Yeah. Um, so like I was telling you, when I had my last concussion, which I would say was probably the worst one, or maybe it was just the catalyst that kind of sent me out of sports. But
Mm-hmm.
number one, just that whole rug being pulled out from under you of your sport. Okay,
Yeah.
you're done. Someone else is telling you that.
Mm.
Um, and not really understanding, like feeling like you can still do it, but like
Mm-hmm.
if you have another concussion, you know,
It's over,
it's
yeah.
over. So after all of that and kind of having to figure it out, go to all these different doctors. I mean, we're so lucky now that there's so much brain research that's been done,
Mm-hmm.
and there's so much that we know now. But it wasn't until later, like I said, that I picked the pieces up. And after I became a yoga teacher, I did this teacher training called Love Your Brain
Mm-hmm.
Yoga. They have some really awesome content out there if anybody that's had concussions wants to look them up. But it's called Love Your Brain Foundation, and they have a teacher training. And I went through it so that I could start working with the Alabama Head Injury Foundation. I'm actually a board member now for the Alabama Head Injury Foundation. And
Wow.
I was working with some of their clients doing virtual yoga and stuff during COVID. And
Mm-hmm.
so I did this training, and I mean, obviously, I loved all the information because I had also experienced some mild traumatic brain injuries through concussions, and it really helped explain a lot about like the just the resilience of people that have had, like, even if you feel like your concussion is small or whatever, they're all traumatic brain injuries.
Yeah.
And even if you feel like your symptoms aren't visible, you don't have a physical disability from it or whatever, like you're still struggling up here. There's a lot going on up here.
Mm-hmm.
You never really know what somebody else is going through, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I learned just that, concussions can literally change your personality. And that's one of the things that I went through, and not understanding why I was so different. And I was like, why am I not my old self anymore? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's something that I really had to explore in my yoga practice as well. And just coming from the athletic identity plus the concussions, there was like just so many layers of things, whether it be, my balance that I struggled with for a while. I had migraines for a while. still have emotional regulation problems that I, just really struggle
Mm-hmm.
with that sort of thing. And so just all of the tools that yoga has given me has not only helped me understand how to cope with some of those things and help me understand how to help myself through those things without having to take a whole bunch of medicine and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also just taught me about confidence and resilience and looking within myself to find strength instead of kind of looking outwardly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, yeah, there's just so many layers to it. But the whole concussion thing, um, yoga is, has been a game changer for so many people that I know, and so many people I've had conversations with that have similar stories as far as concussions and trying the whole medicine route and all of that. And maybe it works for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but it's like the whole fake it till you make it thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't fake it forever. And I think that's just why I love the practice so much, because I get to really be in my own body and understand myself. And that can be scary at first, for sure. I
Mm-hmm.
know yoga is an intimidating thing. I've been trying to get my husband in there for years and still can't. But one day I'm gonna get him in there. And yeah, it's a whole body experience. It's not just about the movement, right? We're linking our brain with our body, which has so many healing components in and of itself, but can also help people literally like regain neural pathways in their brain. I've seen
Mm-hmm.
people go from having hardly any mobility in a certain part of their body to being able to move that part of their body just through breath work and movement and thinking about doing it, right? And the brain is a really cool thing.
Wild.
Yeah.
It's wild. Um, yeah, and I was sharing before we started recording. And if you're new to listening to me, so my daughter has epilepsy. She's 7. She's got diagnosed when she was 2. And not only like being humbled by the fact that you never know what other people are going through, like for her, you would never know that
Right.
anything is going on, like never ever. And my husband, I remember like a really defining moment pretty early on in our journey with it, was uh, we had to go to the children's hospital to do a lot of extensive testing. We were there for multiple days, and was actually her first brain surgery. And there was this man on the elevator who I just happened to share an elevator ride with. And he shared that they had been there for over a week. His daughter had been diagnosed with diabetes and was in ICU, and they were still trying to get her like under control. And that was such a pivotal moment for me to be humbled by what we were going through, because when you're in the thick of whatever the shit is that you're in the thick of, it's the worst it could possibly be. Like
Mm-hmm.
you are just drowning in your own shit and sorrow and all of that. And when he shared that, and I remember I went for like a lap by myself. I was so upset by what he said, and it just like really put everything else into focus. My husband said to me when we got home and after I'd shared all of that, he was like, "Look, this is an inconvenience for her. Like she'll have to take medication. We'll have to carry this burden for her until she can carry it for herself. But the likelihood of her, like with diabetes, with her it being fatal, right, is so much less likely. Like hold on to that. Be humbled by that. Like this
Mm-hmm.
is black and white. We can call this just a very serious inconvenience,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But medicine and technology is so far along that there's medicine we can give
Yes.
her to make it go away. And we have to figure out what that concoction is, right? That's not going to be an easy venture, but we
Mm-hmm.
will get there at some point. And we have to hold on to hope that we will. It could always be worse,
Yes.
right? It could always be worse. And so this month actually is our 1 year anniversary of her last brain surgery. And some shit was coming up for us a couple of weeks ago, and it's been kind of like a difficult conversation in our household outside of this. And I remember saying to him, this time a year ago, we were prepping our daughter for brain surgery. That shit was hard.
Yeah.
Nothing else compares to that,
Yeah.
right? But then learning about the brain and how everything is so connected. So like with epilepsy, a lot of people have triggers. the biggest one is light, right? So when they
Mm-hmm.
do an EEG, they always flash this light in her face, and it never triggered her, never. And so we had to figure out over time what her triggers were. Her two biggest triggers is sleep, which that makes sense, and constipation.
Yeah.
Like when you realize how much your gut is so closely linked to your brain, and then
Mm-hmm.
you start diving into food, and then you learn about how like ketogenic diet is so good for epilepsy, which I would never do that to my child. Like that is a separate kind of torture. um but that, like when you start digging into your brain and how
Mm-hmm.
everything is so connected, and the breath work and the body work that you can do to strengthen your brain or
Mm-hmm.
make it healthier or whatever, it is mind blowing, because just that little start takes you down this huge
Oh
path
yeah.
of what's possible. And it's wild. It's wild. And hormones, like I can remember our neurologist saying that the hardest time in the journey of epilepsy for kids is childhood, right? Because they're growing so fast, their weight's changing, their
Yeah.
brain's developing so quickly. And then puberty, especially for girls,
Mm.
because your hormones. And I'm like, great, just another thing to tack on to puberty for my daughter, right? Um, but it's so interconnected, and you can't treat one thing
Mm-hmm.
without having to look at the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that yoga, just being in the world of yoga and the people who are also in the community of yoga for the most part, it it brings so much to the forefront as like what is, I mean, you get your hardcore yogis, don't get me wrong, that are
Yeah.
kind of hard to sometimes like be in the same room with if you're not on their level.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have normal people
Yeah.
who are also yogis but are super into health and wellness and all different modalities. And
Mm-hmm.
I can remember the first time I said something to my husband about breath work. He was like, "What?" And I'm like, "Just go with it. Let's just try it." And so I got him like on Wim Hof, which was like kind of like made it popular at first. And now my husband's like cold plunging and doing
Doing
breath
yoga.
work and stuff like that. And so, and he's not a believer, right? He's like, he had to see it to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
But now he's like, he's gung ho, like
Mm-hmm.
he's on the train and it's leaving
Because
type
he
of thing.
sees what it's doing for
You
him.
have to
Yeah.
show yourself, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
to like put yourself out there. And maybe it's not yoga, maybe it's something else
Yeah.
that works for you, but put yourself in other situations if you're finding yourself like not feeling good or something's not working or you're hitting a rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And yoga is such a great place to start.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. It really,
Such a
truly
great.
is. It really opened so many doors for me. And granted, this is the field that I went into for work, right?
Mhm.
But just in general, being able to learn about myself and um, grow as a person, like it's like I could not put a value on that. Like it's life changing.
Yeah. Well, it's like that question of like fulfillment versus success,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, like, hopefully you can get fulfillment with a little bit of success,
Yeah.
right? That's ideally the goal. But the fulfillment level, like when I think about my last business versus this level of fulfillment
Yeah.
is so out of the park compared to that. Like, that was
Mm-hmm.
definitely like a business school teaching for me. But for you to be able to have passion projects, but then also like the business platform at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and to be on the board of amazing organizations and to have all of that and to have your own story of why this
Mm-hmm.
is fulfillment and a passion for you, I would think, and I can even attest to for myself, makes it so much more relatable for people to understand your story and
Mm-hmm.
why this is such an important message for you to preach. Because you're not just out there like, ah, I'm flexible, so let me make this work,
Yeah.
right? Or like, I'm super woo woo, let me, go. You actually fully understand the benefits to a level that most people will never, right?
Yeah.
And I say to my husband a lot and to other people too, like even for me coaching women, sometimes I get just as much, if not more, out of sessions with them because it tracks something for me on my own journey. Like
Mm-hmm.
watching them go through something humbles me in some other way or teaches me something. And I do think that's such a special place to be in, to have the honor of being able to hold that space for people. And I'm sure it's probably very similar for you too. Like,
Yeah.
wow, I get to do this.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
Yeah. And one of my favorite things to do is to teach the poses that people don't think they can do. Because when you see that light bulb of like when they do it and they're like, oh, I did it. And I'm like, yeah, you did because you can do it. Like you can.
And knowing that's just a seed planted and it'll
Mm-hmm.
get bigger and bigger.
And
Oh,
they keep coming back and then we do more. And it's just, yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to share. But it's something that others shared with me. And I just feel like I'm in that place now where I have things to share, right? And
mm-hmm.
I had to go through that healing process and I had to learn to understand myself more. Granted, I'm not healed. I think that's a lifelong
Oh,
journey
yeah,
of,
for sure.
overcoming certain things that, I've been through or put myself through, but
Mm-hmm.
I I now understand the journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I understand myself. I'm confident in myself and in my abilities and I just love to share that with others and see those light bulbs go off too. So,
Yeah, it's like you squash one thing and then another thing pops up. It's like I say too, like if growth, like that everybody wants this self evolution and awareness were easy, everyone would do it.
yeah.
And it's not easy. And it's not supposed to be easy. Like there are going to be huge challenges that you have because that's what you grow in,
Mhm.
right? Like you're not growing in the perfect utopia world. Why would you? You're
Right.
just in a rhythm. You have to have forces that are pushing you. Like what my little mantra is, I will light a fire under your ass. It's your choice whether you blow it out or you fan it. But that's on you. I'm going to
Mhm.
light the fire and it's not going to be comfortable. Like you might not like me at every turn and I'll pull back when it feels appropriate, but that's my job as your coach
Mhm.
because I'm not here to be your girlfriend, right? Like I'm here to like push you where you want to be pushed or else you wouldn't have come to me, right?
Mhm.
Um and yeah, there is no destination. It is constant and sometimes that's a really sobering lesson of
Uh-huh.
like, okay, I had the conversation. I'm done. No,
Yeah.
no. Now it's like an insatiable thing, right? Like now there's the next one and you're going to get better the next time and so on and so forth. And I think too, like hearing you share about like teaching people yoga for me, I'm coaching myself
Mhm.
in varying chapters of my life. And I feel like if I can talk to a client, anyone in front of me, like I would talk to myself, it might work for them. And that's the most authentic thing I can
Yeah.
do from my seat. But also, that's the only thing I know. Like, I can't pretend to be another version of this, right? So, I'm going to teach you, right? Like, if I'm your yoga instructor or I'm your coach, I'm going to coach you like I would want to be coached.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't work for you, that's fine. We're just not compatible.
Yeah.
But that's the whole thing is like, I've been on that side. I've
Mhm.
been that client before. I've been there. And it's like a gift.
It is.
It really is.
Yeah. No,
And not
truly.
everyone can do it. And I think, and I've been to a lot of different yoga classes. And I was sharing about my friend earlier. We actually went to high school together. And I remember we had her come in for my husband's manager retreat. It was down at the beach. She lived at the beach and hadn't talked to her in years. And I'm like, I know you're this big yogi. Like, can you come do this for the, office retreat? It was like, I don't know, 7 or 8 guys, couple of girls who are all business professionals doing yoga. And I'm thinking, like, this is going to be hilarious. Like,
Yeah.
none of these
Yeah.
people have ever done yoga. And then she came in and she held the space for who was in the room,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
that is such an art to be able to meet people where they are. And I'm sure for you with athletes, like you're not walking into a room with a bunch of yogis who are going to speak the language and understand the vocabulary that you use
Mhm.
when you call things. I mean, because it's like a whole different language, right?
Mhm.
And you have to be able to read the room. That's also a really special talent as well.
Yes, definitely. I mean, for me, I come from a personal training background from before I was a yoga teacher. So
Yeah.
I think that really served me well in
Yeah.
understanding that, not everything works for everybody. But when I teach to athletes, I mean, when I teach gymnasts, I teach different than I teach to football, than I teach to
Sure.
soccer or baseball. It's all different. And so there's a lot of planning that goes on
Mm-hmm.
behind the scenes with me. I'm a big planner. But yeah, being able to layer in like the different types of breath work and understand what that population needs or what that person needs, that's really important too, because yoga can go a million different directions with it, honestly.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and you come to me at the studio, you're probably going to find a little bit more strength based challenging type of class than I would teach, to a football player who needs some help with their back and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it is so different everywhere that I teach, but that's what I love about it is I get to be creative and I get to help people. And that's honestly something that I always said growing up. My parents said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I just want to help people. And I literally said that since I was a kid, and here we are helping people, and it just makes me feel good as a teacher knowing that people are getting up like, "Oh, thank you so much. I feel so much better." Like that is a gift to me. It's like I'm so glad, like that was my intention for you.
Mm-hmm.
Is just to feel better, mind, body, and spirit. So yeah, I love it. It's my biggest passion.
Yeah, it's a very high level of gratification.
Mm-hmm.
And in my experience, like nothing else really compares to that professionally
Mm-hmm.
to out like to understand that you've changed somebody's world or you've changed their day. Like even when I was a nurse, like that I felt that too. I did labor and delivery, and so there was definitely a
Gosh.
lot of gratification that came with that. It's also like where my passion working with women has been. I also have all sisters. I was raised by a single mom. Like
Mm-hmm.
it all checks out,
Yeah,
right? But there's just so much. There's so much there. I feel like I could sit and talk to
I
you
know.
forever. Okay, so just for the sake of
Yeah.
time, I'm going to put all the different ways to find you, your YouTube channel, your blog post, which is amazing that you wrote, the yoga room, how to get in. Let me say this too. I love how the yoga room uses the app that they do. I don't even know what platform that is, but love that.
Yeah.
Love,
We
love,
have
love.
our own app.
I love it. And so all the different ways to follow you and stay in touch. I do want to ask you to share your hype list.
Okay.
Because I want you to brag about yourself. I want you to be full of yourself and celebrate something you've accomplished. So anything you want to share just off the cuff that you're proud of.
I think I think I'm proud of, and this might be a little more long-winded than you're looking for, but I think what I'm
Give it
proud
to
of
me.
is just everything coming full circle. Like coming from where I came from being so, you know, not confident in myself at all and not knowing who I was and really struggling with a lot of different things, and to look back from where I came from, and then when I got to Auburn and I got back in school and did all the things that I did, and now I'm here owning a yoga studio and sharing it with the community, like that full circleness, like being able to rise up and find my resilience, that's what I'm proud of. But I also continue to do that every day. Like
Mm-hmm.
every day is not easy, right? I get up sometimes and I'm just full of anxiety, or I don't want to get out of bed, just like any other person, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I continue to do that day after day. And I also know how to listen to my body and stop when I need to and
Mm-hmm.
rest when I need to. And like all of those are just big wins of being able to really know who I am and be able to share this practice with the community. So
Mm, that was great.
thanks.
That was great. I love being able to hear people share stuff like that, especially when it's like more full circle like that,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that w- we don't typically have a lot of moments in our life to say stuff like that out loud, to
Mm-hmm.
celebrate that, or even remind ourselves. Uh, the Hype Squad was named after the Hype List, which is this assignment I give to clients, which is essentially like, look at all the shit that you have done,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, remind yourself of that more often because it's so easy to fall in this moment of like, I can't do this. Like, this is too hard. I can't climb this mountain. And we don't realize we've already climbed 10 other mountains that are even higher than this one. But this just feels so big in this moment, right? It's like you need to eh, relate to it in a different way, or, it just needs to be more on the forefront of what you've already accomplished.
Yeah. Yeah,
So I love that
totally.
you shared that because I think that that is such a huge win. So thank you.
Yeah.
Um, and thank you for coming and doing this
Thank you for
and
having me.
stepping out of your element and like just taking a chance and
Yeah,
coming over and recording this.
of
I
course.
appreciate it. And I think I have a couple of more like classes on my app that I need to sign up. So I'm
Yes,
like,
please do.
oh, hot yoga. I need
Come
to
see
get back to that,
us.
especially in the winter. All right. Thank you, Mary Grayson.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you being here. Thanks for getting hyped with us and be kind to yourselves. Goodbye. That was
That
great.
was awesome.